Me too, because I'll get nervous. But anyhow, so I think college is probably a good place to start, right? Dave, you said that we both went to SUNY Cortland together. And I think, when I was going to college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I honestly didn't. I was clueless. My major was undeclared until I couldn't be undeclared anymore, and I had to actually choose a major. Part of me kicked around teaching for a minute because Cortland's an amazing school for education. But I realized real quick that I wasn't passionate about teaching. So I thought, well, I don't want to waste that spot with somebody who's really trying to get into that program. So, and of course, my dog starts barking on cue. So ignore that. That's my dog who's trying to get my attention.
That takes our numbers, by the way, up to 32 if we count your dog.
Okay. Oh, great. Well, he'll participate. Just ignore him. Anyhow, so when I had no idea what I wanted to do, I thought, well, let me at least take courses that appeal to me, right? And, something that either I can learn, because, I didn't learn a lot in high school. I didn't pay attention very much. Or things that just are interesting to me. So I started to take a few courses on international studies, which was basically just learning about different cultures around the world and things like that, and gaining not only an appreciation for them, but understanding our place in the world. So anyhow, fast forward, I graduate with a degree in international studies and a minor in Spanish. I decided to take Spanish because it was one of the courses that I actually was good at throughout elementary school and junior high and high school. So I ended up getting a minor in that. And when I graduated, Dave, I am going to shout out the year we graduated because I'm proud of it, even though we're old. Is that all right with you? Okay. So we graduated before all of you probably were born, which is slightly terrifying, but graduated in 1992. Yes, 1992. And so here I am with this degree. I have no idea what I'm going to do with it because it didn't really groom me for anything specific. It was just, you learned about world cultures and you care about other people, and, that's about it. So I thought, well, this is going to be a problem because I know my parents are going to make me get a job. So I thought, well, what's going on? And I thought, oh, the Olympics are in Barcelona, Spain this year. And I'm a huge sports nut. I love sports. And I thought, how can I find a way to get over to Spain and then kill two birds with one stone, like work at a job that would be amazing and live in Spain and put my, education to test. And at the time, my brother was working at MTV. I'll get to that later. And there were a few news crews that were covering the Olympics. And so from a friend to my brother to a coworker to another person who didn't even work at MTV, I got a contact at NBC who, covers the Olympics. And it took me, this was about January of 1992. I got a contact at NBC. From about mid-January or late January until my spring break, I called this woman, because remember, this is before internet, this is before email, this is before cell phones. I know that's hard to imagine, but that was the world we lived in. So the only thing you could do, what's that?
It was a nice time, though, without cell phones. I enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah, things were simpler. Remember when our parents said that?
Yeah.
Anyhow, sorry, I lost. Oh yeah, so it took me having to use the phone and call this woman, shout out to Felicia Sugarman, who used to work at NBC. I used to call her, I think it was an average of 3 times a week, at least 2, for about 6 weeks. And every time I called, of course, her assistant would conveniently say, oh, she's not here, she's not available, probably because hundreds of other people were trying to get these PA positions working for the Olympics. And so finally, after badgering and increased anxiety and me feeling like I'm bothering her and they're going to scream at me and tell me to stop driving them nuts, I just felt like, you know what, I'm just going to keep doing it because what do I have to lose? And after about the 7th attempt, her assistant actually put me through to Felicia. And this is somebody who I had a connection to through 2 other people. So it took that long. And long story short, I came in for an interview during spring break, went to 30 Rockefeller Plaza, terrified. And about 2 minutes into the interview, they had a massive fire drill in the building. And what was great about it was it broke the ice, and it totally broke the tension. But the funny part was they made me put my Spanish skills to test in the stairwell where everyone was congregating in the stairwell. So I had to, with no lead time, just have an impromptu conversation. Of course, I fumbled over my words. I'm sure I made absolutely no sense because I was just book smart or book taught. And somehow, some way, the woman gave Felicia the thumbs up, like, yeah, she could probably get by. And I ended up getting the job, which I couldn't believe. So go to Spain, unbelievable experience. It was there that I realized, wow, maybe I'm actually good at this PA thing, like this production thing. It's exciting. I hustle hard. I bust my ass. You know, I've learned so much. You get to meet people or see people, you know, and I thought maybe this is what I should do, is sports production. You know, my brother Ted was in the music side at MTV, and I thought maybe this is what I'll do. So started to go through the chains of trying to reach out to different networks, and NBA, CBS, NBC, ESPN, you know, you name it, from back in the day. And either no one was hiring, or they may not have been hiring someone like me who had general knowledge of sports, but like, I'm not going to be able to tell you who the Heisman winner was in 1967. So ESPN at that point was like, if you don't know those kinds of stats, we can't help you. So after about a month of trying to look for an entry-level job in sports production, I started to panic because all my friends from college were now getting jobs. This is like October of '92 now. And so lo and behold, through Felicia Sugarman, the woman who hired me, back to Sally Frattini, who was the woman who was looking for actually an assistant at MTV at the time, gave my name to Sally. Sally, of course, knew of me through my brother, interviewed me, and I got the job as her assistant. And it was funny because I was hesitant to go to MTV because I felt like, oh, that was Ted's thing, you know, and I don't want to be accused of like the nepotism and, oh, you got the job because of your brother, and, you know, it's going to be harder to make friends and all this other stuff. But lucky for me, Ted was on his way out of MTV and was starting to catapult his own film career. So my entrance came right as he was exiting, which I thought, you know what, put your ego aside. You're going to probably have to prove that you're a hard worker, a little bit harder than the average person because of this, but just do it. You're not going to get a job anywhere else. So hustle and get in there. And you know what? It was the greatest thing. It was the greatest decision I ever made. I got my college production education at MTV. And that's what my brother said. And that's what, if you ask most people who have worked at MTV over the years, they'll say that if they came in on that entry level, like you guys, most of you guys, where you're close to graduating, or, you know, you're whatever it is where you're at in life, to try to get that first step in the door is always really hard. But once you get in, if you can get in on the ground level like that, it's an amazing thing if you can make it work. And of course, back then in the 90s, it was a totally different world, right? How you get jobs, how you apply for jobs, how you go about sustaining a job, what kind of jobs there are anymore, especially in our business, has changed, right? Really dramatically. So it's a whole new world right now. But I worked at MTV for about 9 years, or no, sorry, that's 5 years at the time, and worked my way up to producer, and was incredibly fortunate to have worked on a bunch of different types of production. So whereas a lot of people came in and found their niche, you know, their niche, and said, oh, I like hip hop, or I like events, or I like metal, or I like alternative music, or, you know, comedy, or MTV Sports. You know, some people went that route and wanted to go really into a very specific job or show. But because, as always, I'm never sure what it is I want to do, I thought, let me just try to get a little bit of everything, and then maybe that'll help me focus on what I don't like at least, even if I can't figure out what I do like. And that's kind of what I did. And I'm really happy I did, because I was able to get studio production experience, which I know that's predominantly this class, right, David? Like all you guys are participating in, yeah, right?
A lot of this class is advanced TV studio, but we do have a lot of people who are not involved in this class yet, or taking even basic TV studio. We do have basic TV studio students in here also. But the one thing I do hear you saying and speaking about a lot is persistence. When you were talking about your mentor at MTV, could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's really important. A lot of people tend to think, oh, I go to college, I'm going to get a job right there. I have an internship. I'm just going to be up there. But I hear with you, there's something that makes you persistent. You tend to go after certain things, being able to take yourself to the next step. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I'll tell you in one word. It's called anxiety. And I think a lot of people, especially now, can relate to that sentiment, right? I've always had, I guess you call it a healthy dose of anxiety, right? As a kid, as far as I can remember. And what was good about, when I say healthy dose, it motivated me, because what was bad about it was I made myself my own worst enemy, right? And I'm like, you're not doing enough, and you're not good enough, and blah, 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 which is not good. That's not the good side. But what was good about it was it kicked me in the ass to, like, you know, say, well, what else can I do? Okay, I sent my resume in. I've called twice a week for 6 weeks. And I was like, I kind of just felt like I don't ever want to have regrets about what could I have done better, different. I mean, look, that's life. We learn as we live. What could we do better? But at that point, as a 21-year-old, not even a 21-year-old, or maybe I was, I can't remember. I had no idea, like I said, what I wanted to do. So I just felt like, with Ted as somebody who, you know, my brother had an amazing career at MTV. For those of you, I can brag a little because I am very proud of him. He was one of the original co-creators of Yo MTV Raps, and he did tons and tons of productions at MTV, and he became kind of a legend. So in a way, while that was something that I was able to aspire to on a lot of levels, once I knew, okay, production and television and music is really what I want to root myself in after a couple of years of trying it out. Part of it was that, you know, there's a lot of people who are just as good as you, if not better. And believe me, there were lots of other people who were creatively better than me, way better than me. But they were my peers. So there was like that healthy dose of competition that also fueled the, what am I doing? Like, you know, Adam Freeman is, you know, who does TRL, like he's doing this, and Tim Healy, who does this, is doing that. And, you know, I wanted to kind of keep up with them in a way. So part of it was, you know, healthy competition. Part of it is somewhat healthy anxiety that self-motivates. And then the other thing is, you know, music. Who doesn't love music, right? And at the time, it was music television. Like, so, you know, before social media and all these other platforms, you know, the place to go to watch music and also have a place to go where you felt like people spoke to you and your age group and what your generation feels like and what is important to you, it was MTV in the 80s and 90s, hands down. And so for me, it was a cool place to work, of course. And as somebody who was that core, I hate the word core demo, that's such a horrible, crappy industry term, but for people who were my age group at the time, it was the place to go. And I knew what was popular. I had friends who were, you know, tastemakers back in the day. You know, we all kind of were, and we all kind of created this interesting culture at MTV as, you know, newly graduated college students who didn't know shit about production. Sorry, there's your first curse. But I'm keeping it real.
I'm not going to go there, but it's good. It's fine. This is, by the way, I want to, for all those people out there, this is the real world out there. And I'm not doing a MTV pun, because they'll be thinking of reality TV, and we'll go into reality TV, I promise you, in a little bit. But
Yeah.
this is real world. This is really the way it happens. In the control room, I will tell you that nothing is censored. So I just want to let you know, and Jen and I had a whole discussion yesterday when we were doing some pre-production to discuss that. I said, I don't want this censored. I want this to be real. And I think the greatest thing, one of the great things about Jen, is the fact that she always keeps it real. And I know some
Thank you,
people
David.
coming on later on this webcast, this webinar, as I'm calling it, will actually attest to the fact that Jen back in the day, now she's really nervous, but back in the day would keep it real. And I think everybody right now who is listening to me, who might be on the webinar, which Jen can't see who's there, but I'm not going to go there, actually,
Please don't.
actually would tell you that Jen is real. And even when I was speaking to some other people about, coming on today, some of our Cortland alum coming on, everybody, the first thing they said was the thing they love most about Jen, and it's one of the things I love about Jen too, is the fact that she's real. She's a real person.
Thank you, David.
And I think that you're going to see that, and I think you've seen this so far. And I'm also giving Jen a second to rest her voice for a second, so I'm helping out a little bit there. But
well, I feel like I'm also telling my life story, and you got to tell me to fast forward too, because I can talk to the cows come home.
I want people to understand where you come from. I want them to understand what it takes to get there. I don't want them to say, "Oh, this is Jen Demme, and Jen is now the vice president." No, I don't. I want them to understand who you were to get to where you were. And no matter what was there, I want them to understand what you had to do, how you had to network, how you had to do all this stuff. And it's extremely, extremely important that they know this.
Well, and I think look, I have, just so everybody knows, I'm a parent. I have 3 stepchildren who I've helped raise, and they're all in their 20s. So I have I've gained a real appreciation for the struggles that people in their 20s now, especially, are going through. And at first I was like every other Gen Xer telling their millennial kid, just like our parents used to say the same shit to us, when I was your age, blah, blah, blah. But now that I understand the fact that, you're applying digitally for jobs, and there are now those, what do they call those? I can't remember. The programs that kind of weed out certain resumes from others and then bring some others to the top. So there's this whole different process now of getting jobs that we never had to deal with, Dave, because it required a face-to-face. It required you really putting a lot of work into this paper resume with thick, card stock and all this other crap. And now, watching my kids struggle, and, my youngest just graduated SUNY Purchase and is really struggling to find a job now. And he's got a bachelor's degree. And I think, it's really tough. So I get it. And I, even though you guys are probably looking at David and I as, oh boy, they sound like my parents or whatever, I understand. And it's also my job too, to try to understand, because, and this may be a good segue over to MTV, because I could fast forward through all the other stuff in my career. We can maybe touch on it later, but what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so it's my job to actually focus on content and finding content at MTV on the international side. I'll get to that in a second. That appeals to 20-year-olds, or at least 18 to 36-year-olds is kind of they've widened the aperture now, because now it depends on what platform you're consuming MTV on. So people like us, the older generation who grew up watching MTV on TV, wants to still watch stuff on TV for the most part, and obviously younger people don't. And so anyhow, before I get into my job a little bit more in detail, and then I want to ask the group some questions. So I stayed at MTV through the 90s, and then I had an opportunity to work with my brother on one of his films, an independent film called Monument Ave. in the 90s, and I thought, you know what, let me try and see if film is what I want to do. Who knows? Again, no regrets. And I was scared to leave MTV at the time because I thought, oh my God, if I leave, am I ever going to be welcome back if I decide this was a mistake, you know? And thankfully, they completely understood. They supported it. They thought, you know what, if anything, it's going to make you a better producer and director if you come back to television after working in film. So I left MTV. I left a staff job at 27 years old and went to work on an independent film for 3 months in Boston. And again, it was like, at that point in my life, it was as great as my experience in Barcelona. And so for about 2 years after that, I dabbled in film, working on the set side, working as a set PA for the assistant director team. It was an amazing experience, but the problem was I was approaching 30. I was working 18-hour days, you know, carrying film to Panavision, you know, and like delivering the dailies, like, you know, and you hear horror stories about how PAs leave film in cabs. And I mean, it's just a nightmare. So it was to talk about anxiety, after an 18-hour day, that was crazy. But I realized, again, kind of like the teaching thing that I alluded to earlier, you know, this isn't something I'm passionate about. I respect this art form, and it really is an unbelievable experience. If any of you guys have the opportunity to work on a feature film set or even a short film or commercial, it is worth it because there's a lot of parallels between TV and film, but there are major departures that set the two apart. And it's a really cool thing to kind of say that you experienced. But after that, and realizing I'm making like $200 a day, which isn't bad, but as a 27-year-old at that point who had been working in TV and became a producer, it was like, I feel like I'm going backwards. I ended up freelancing. I kind of started my own production company, but it was literally just an LLC. It was just me. And I freelanced, and I was so fortunate enough to be able to go back to MTV. And because I had experience working in multiple types of productions, I kind of was one of those people who often came up in, oh, what's Jen Demme doing? Can she floor produce this TRL special? Or, oh, Demme worked on the Video Music Awards for 3 years. Have her come back as the coordinating producer and blah, blah, blah. Or, you know, whatever it is, spring break, New Year's Eve, field shoots, whatever. And so I was able to ride that wave for a couple of years, and I landed at Fuse, which I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard of, but it used to be, I mean, it still is a brand, but it's unfortunately not doing well at all. But Fuse was, at the time, part of this Canadian channel called Much Music, and they called it Much Music USA, and then they rebranded it as Fuse as a direct competition for MTV, right as MTV was moving away from music and going into reality. And they kind of touted themselves as, you know, we're going to save the music video, and we're going to do this metal show, and we're going to do this, you know, studio show. So I started my journey at Fuse for 10 years, which was amazing. And a couple of other things here and there, and found my way in 2014 at Fuse with new ownership. And it became pretty clear to me pretty soon that my job was going to be in jeopardy, even though nobody was telling me. But I had already lived through a layoff at Fuse, like years earlier, left, came back. And I thought, you know what, I'm not going to let them lay me off again. I can't deal with that. So I'm going to try to find another job. And it was terrifying as a, 35-year-old who saw myself aging myself up into this business, which is very young, and also aging myself out of the music that I was interested in, yeah, we'll get to that later about music. But I was concerned, but thank God for LinkedIn, man, because LinkedIn, I hadn't been on LinkedIn in like 3 years, and I went there begrudgingly. I didn't want to go. I was not looking forward to it. And I found a recruiter had hit me up, ironically enough, like literally the week earlier, and said that MTV International was looking for literally the job that I do and the job that I wanted to do for my career to kind of expand it. And so lo and behold, I ended up coming back to, talk about coming back full circle, to the mothership at MTV, but this time on the international side. And my job right now is I work on the music team. We're called the Talent and Music Team. And we are, to drill it down into the simplest facts, we are the team that is bringing music back to the brand where it doesn't exist. And we are bolstering it and beefing it up in the territories where it already does exist. And part of that job for me is to commission new television, yes, linear television series that are based around music, but also work with my colleague who is the me on the digital side, and try to also look for opportunities on the digital side for us to do. And that has been the majority of my job, to come up with internally and also work with external production companies, have them pitch us ideas, and then I pitch them up to my boss, get them hopefully greenlit, and then we go into production. And for the first 4 years of me being back here, it was literally just 3 people, myself, a freelance development executive, and a staff senior production manager, and then my boss. And it wasn't until about 6 months ago that we just hired a kick-ass development executive to join our team to help build up the development ideas, because we were on this whole trend in 2020. All our goals for this year have been completely put aside because of Corona. But the idea was that we wanted to get ahead of things and finally really hit this year big with some new series that we commissioned from the headquarters side in the US that goes out to everybody. And then also simultaneously, we have identified certain heritage brands like Cribs and Yo and Real World, and all these other iconic, Unplugged, those kind of brands. We're trying to dust those off and reintroduce them to your generation, pretty much, because like I said before, you guys most of you weren't alive when the first Yo came out. And that was when hip hop was an underground, city only niche culture. And it's, as everybody can attest, it's become the global language. It's become the global genre, and it's become pop. Hip hop is pop music now. So we thought of all those brands, Yo would be one that makes the most sense to bring back. And of course, I kind of giggled when my boss said that to me, because I was like, holy shit, like, you want to bring back Yo, which was my brother's show, and you want me to do it? And at first I was like, yes. I was like, I've been complaining about this for forever. Like, there has not been a proper show for rap music and hip hop culture since Yo. And then excitement turned to absolute terror and fear for several reasons. One, my whole point was like, how do you do another version of Yo in this day and age, when it worked back then because it was a moment in time that was just perfect. It was a perfect storm. And then of course the inevitable, oh my God, like Ted was way more creative than me, so how am I going to be able to live up to that? So basically it's been an amazing journey, but the last 2.5 years, we have, in addition to commissioning new series from the HQ side that I kind of explained earlier, we are working with our local teams internationally to have them do their own versions of the new Yo under me. So I created, not I, my team, my team and I worked hard on trying to identify what format could not work for this generation, and what still resonates on the hip hop scale and all that stuff. And we did a pilot in Singapore, in Malaysia, sorry, not Singapore, Malaysia. And then we launched it in the UK, in London, and then we launched it in Germany, and we launched it in South Africa. And we were literally in the middle of launching it, and I am not lying, in Milan, in MTV Italy, in February when the coronavirus hit, and I was in Milan when the city went on lockdown. So that was crazy. So, my job is a little bit of, I hope I'm making sense. I'm starting to think I'm not, but
you're really doing a great job. I just want to say one thing. I'm going to give you a break for 1 second here.
Yeah.
If anybody has any questions, feel free to message me, and I'll definitely ask those questions. Gabriella, I got your thing here. I will bring that up to Jen in a few minutes. But I want to just, you're touching on Yo MTV Raps and so forth. Could you tell us how that show actually got started? I think I've heard stories about this, and I think that people would be really interested in hear this. And again, how those experiences actually will lead to with Yo MTV Raps today.
Perfect. No, I know exactly where you're going, and I'm glad you're doing this because I'm rambling in other directions.
You're doing a great job. I am fascinated, and believe me, I could hear this over and over and over because I love this stuff. Okay. Anybody who's gone to my classes knows that I love this stuff, and I really do. And I would say I'd get off on this stuff, but when I'm trying to stay professional here. But yeah, no, I really do like it. So again, I told you this is a true to life conversation, and we are going to say stuff.
Cool.
Go ahead.
Well, I can tell you that. So Yo got started. It was 1988. Yes, that was quite some time ago. And my brother was an entry-level production assistant working for the MTV promos department. And the promos department is just that. If for those of you who don't know, they're the team of people who create not only tune-in spots for the shows that you need to tune into, but image spots for the network, things that those weird little like MTV IDs and stuff like that. And so Ted was just a young entry-level PA working for promos. And he and his boss at the time were talking, and he said, we really should, because Ted was always passionate about hip hop. That's a whole other story. I'll leave it with that at that. And it rubbed off on me, obviously. So he was pitching to his boss, Peter Doherty, at the time. He said, Pete, why can't we do a hip hop show? And at the time on MTV was very much branded as a rock channel, a rock and pop channel. So it was everything from Madonna, the Rolling Stones, John Cougar Mellencamp, Duran Duran, Billy Idol. I mean, you can go on. And the only non-white face on the network was Michael Jackson, because he's the king of pop, right? And maybe Herbie Hancock, because that Rocket video was huge back in the day. But there was a visible absence of people on the brand, not who represented the brand, because we had J.J. Jackson was one of the VJs, but as a person who was African-American, but there were no one was playing music that represented, for lack of a better word, Black culture or anyone other than white, rock or pop. So it was met with Ted convinced Peter to pitch it to Doug Herzog and Judy McGrath, who were the two pioneering creative forces, along with Tom Freston at MTV. I mean, it's like bow down, because they were the creative gods that really set the culture, the tone of the culture at MTV back in the day. So they pitch it to Doug. They look at Peter like he's nuts, because they were like, that's not really our demo. Like our demo is this, and we don't have hip hop videos on the channel or rap videos, on the channel. So I don't know what we're going to do. And they said, you know what? Come back to us with a little bit more of a fleshed out plan. So they come back, and this time Peter brings Ted. And he basically threatened him and said, you are not to speak in this meeting, because this is like the top level executive tier, like you have just lucky to be in their presence, basically. And of course, Ted couldn't keep his mouth shut. And the minute that it was met with any other like resistance, it became the Ted Demme show. And he, through his personality and his passion, convinced them to spend, like, I don't know how much, but it was some ridiculously low amount of money I think if it was like $3,000, that was a lot on a pilot. And so Peter knew Fab Five Freddy, who was kind of a Andy Warhol in the art, hip hop and urban art scene and music scene and culture scene. And so he said, I think Fab would be a great host. Let's talk to him. So that's kind of how it started. And he let Ted produce it. And Ted, I don't think he knew anything except how to count, I don't even think he knew how to count talent in. I don't think he knew how to do, all right, here we go, Fab, in 5, 4, any of that stuff. And they just went on pure gut and passion. And the product was messy and all this stuff, but it was one of these moments where he got a then unknown Will Smith, who was then known as the Fresh Prince, as everyone knows. But he was a rapper with DJ Jazzy Jeff, and he got him to do some freestyle rap at the top of the show. And then they did the pilot from a Run DMC concert with the Beastie Boys, and the rest is history. And it went from a weekly show. They aired the pilot, and it was at that point on the channel, it was the highest rated debut show out of anything that the channel had ever seen. They immediately greenlit a series order, and it was in production, and it went to a daily show with Ed and Dre, and it became an iconic franchise that basically brought rap music, Black culture, hip hop culture from the inner cities to the suburbs and to America, and then it got exported from there. So that's is that what you were asking, Dave?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. But right now, since you're talking about this, I think it's it's good. I'm going to have one of our students ask you a question right now. Gabrielle, so I'm going to unmute her microphone here. And
sure.
Gabrielle, here you are. And I'm going to go let you ask the question to Jen.
Hi, Jen.
Hey, Gabriella.
I just want to say that your story is really inspiring.
Oh, wow, cool.
I'm pretty old. I'm also kind of figuring my life out, and I finally just figured it out. So hearing this story about how you got to this point is really awesome to me. But my question to you right now, what ways would you suggest a student in communications can obtain the necessary experience that you have for this position? Like what?
That's a great question. It's a really great question. And all right, pre-coronavirus? No, I'm kidding. I'm just anything now. It's because we don't know where we're going, right? With this coronavirus, we don't know how that's going to impact employment and internships and all that kind of stuff. But I would say, as I alluded to before, back in my day, it was, you knock on the door in person, literally, and you call them nonstop and you get in their face until they basically tell you to F off, or they hire you, But now, knowing how challenging it is, like when you guys upload your resumes and it goes into this pool of, thousands of people, and thank you, yes, algorithm, that was the word I was trying to figure out before. That makes it almost impossible for you guys to have a fighting chance to say, like, hey, like, give me a chance to show you who I am as a person, not just who I am on paper, right? And so I know that's really challenging. But two things that I can only speak to from my experience, not having not lived in your shoes, understanding just how frustrating it is right now to get work. One, especially if you're not sure what you want to do, but you kind of know, like, this is the area I want to go into. If there are opportunities, I'm saying if you are able to go onto like a job site and see, or like the Viacom CBS website, let's say, because that's that's who owns MTV. And you see all these jobs, right? Try to look at, because I started out as an assistant, right? And I know most people, when they hear that, it's like, oh man, I don't want to be an assistant. I don't want to be an assistant because I know that's going to be a commitment for like a year to 2 years. And oh man, how is that going to give me experience, right? And the reason I jumped on that job because I was panicking, because I was like, I just got to get a job, right? But I will say that being somebody's assistant, especially somebody who has a job that is somewhat important, you know, at the time I was reporting to, I worked for, her title was executive in charge of production. And so she, you know, all the producers knew her, all the executives knew her. She was, you know, pretty high up in the company. So by being her assistant, which didn't really give me many hands-on, you know, didn't give me hands-on experience in production so much, but it gave me access to people by being her assistant, to people I would never have had access to as like an intern or a PA. So here's an example, you know, the head of MTV needs Sally to attend, my boss, to attend the meeting. Who do they call? They call me. You know, they email me like, Jen, I need to, you know, so they immediately, even though they're just viewing me as an assistant, I'm already on a first name basis with these people, right? And now I have an opportunity in small doses, if I see them on the way to the bathroom or the soda machine or whatever, I can be like, oh, hey, Doug, Herzog, who you have no idea who I am, but hey, you know, and slowly but surely by being somebody's assistant, you get kind of you get a bird's eye view of the scope of their role, because you get to see like, oh, these are the people they talk to, these are the meetings they go to, these are the, you know, whatever it is that I witnessed them doing as being their assistant. It gives you that access to all these other people. So after I'd been with her for about 1.5 years, because I told her, I said, of course I'll commit to 1 year. Then 1 year came and she said, can you commit for another 6 months? Because at that point, she had spent so much time trying to train me that she didn't want to have to train somebody else if I went into the PA pool. So I thought at that moment, man, like I really want to be a PA full time, but I better do the right thing and do her a solid, right? Because then, not that she's going to owe me, but she might look out for me down the line. So I was like, in what 6 months? It's going to pass really quick. So I did that. And then by working with her, I also got to know all the producers, so that when there were opportunities for certain specials, like, you know, there would be times where the entire department of producers would have to work together on some huge event or stunt, like Spring Break back in the day. They would take all the producers who did all those shows in the studio and either do, you know, event versions of those, like a concert or whatever, or they would do these crazy, ridiculous Spring Break game show things and things that you would imagine would be Spring Break type shows. And they would need PAs. And I remember saying to my boss, and I'm glad I did this. This is number 2. So number 1, assistant is helpful, right? Because you get access to people you normally wouldn't have access to, especially if those people are the people you eventually want to work for or work with. Second thing is, and this is what I was getting to, I ended up saying to my boss, hey, look, just want to let you know, if there's ever any opportunity for me to do anything on anything, like the Video Music Awards or whatever, you name it, Spring Break, as your assistant or a PA or whatever, and you think you can spare me, great. And that's all it took. It planted the seed in her brain, like, oh, because I said, because no one has to pay me because you're already paying me. So I'm free labor, essentially. So once that went around, she was like, oh, yeah, you could take Jen. Jen will work for you. And I was like, you know, and it became this almost not a free-for-all, but the opportunity started to come around what my job was expected of me. So I was able to go to Spring Break as a PA. I was able to do this amazing New Year's Eve concert back then when Nirvana, Pearl Jam, the Breeders, Cypress Hill, and Chili Peppers were all in their heyday. And it was in Seattle. So it was like, you can imagine, like for somebody that was 21, it was pretty awesome. But so that's how I started to get into these, like, every once in a while, if there was an emergency, Jen could do it kind of situations. And then finally, after 1.5 years, Sally said to me, all right, girl, it's time for you to fly. Like, I'm going to let you go and go now work for a producer. So that's kind of how I got into production. And it was great because I already knew these people. They already knew my personality. So in a weird way, it gave me a slight, at least in the beginning, edge above my peers. And then of course they showed him what they could do, and everyone shined. But so that's one thing I would suggest big time, that don't overlook executive assistant positions, because while you can definitely get stuck in that if you let it. If you let yourself get stuck in it, you could be a lifelong assistant. I mean, but that's not a bad thing either, to be honest with you, if you align yourself with the right person. But it's a foot in the door. It's an opportunity for you to get a very quick experience on how your boss's world functions. It gives you an opportunity on how to communicate with the higher level execs without feeling, you may feel crazy inside, but it gives you that kind of edge where you can act like you're not so, starstruck that you're seeing the head of the company, and it helps. It really does. So that's one big thing. And the other thing I would suggest is internships. And I know everyone says that, but I wasn't an intern. Like I said, I was an assistant, but most of my peers who started when I started, a lot of them started as interns, and they started working, at a semester or over the course of a semester at MTV. And again, it's like you're in competition with all these other interns, right? It's competitive, and you have to go into it with a sports mind, which may be why, and I'm just realizing this, may be why, Dave, I was able to be such a pain in the ass, because I have that sports competition mind, even though I'm a mediocre athlete at best. But I think that was kind of what gave me a little bit of an edge, was like, I'm not going to take this loss lightly. I'm going to learn from it, pivot, and go again, get back on the horse. So with an internship,
I say it makes you stronger. Even if there's a little bit of failure, it's going to make you stronger, and you realize this is going to make me better.
Well, yeah. I mean, nobody likes failure. I mean, it sucks. Let's be honest. Failing sucks. It's awful. It's embarrassing. It's everything. Everyone. I mean, we all can relate to that on a different level. But it's the only way you really learn. If you I didn't go to school for television. I didn't go to school to be a content creator. I didn't go to school to be some music, whatever the hell I am. It's passion, excitement, and not taking no for an answer unless it's final. I mean, I've also been known to Demi, the answer's no, so shut the hell up, and that's cool. I've learned to get a hard skin, because I'd rather push somebody to that point to be like, are you sure? You sure that this answer is no, And anyway, I'm straying off topic. To go back to the intern thing, I think from what I've experienced and what I've witnessed with friends in this business, if you get in as an intern and you rise above or at least keep your head up with the other competition, but there's got to be something that sets you apart from everybody else for people to take notice. And it doesn't always have to be, oh, that person's so creative. And I think that was what my problem was. I always thought, I'm not the most creative person in this room. Definitely not. But I need to find out what it is I am really good at and harness that and try to be the best that I can be at that, so that I can stand out. And at that point, I was like, all I can stand on is my work ethic.
So the one
and being pleasant. Yeah.
So I was going to say, Jen, one thing that you're suggesting to our students is that once you get in there, that's in some ways, the easy part. What you do when you make yourself, when you get in there, is really the hard part. And that's what will separate you from the rest.
Right. I mean, I would say for our generation, Dave, that was certainly the case. I'm not so sure now. I think now the hard part is getting your foot in the damn door.
Okay.
I really do. But to your point, because the reason I say that is because there are a lot of people, and you guys will realize this too. You probably already have realized this at other jobs that you've had. There is, and this is everywhere, this is not just in television, but for some reason this seems to happen a lot in our business. There is a segment of the population that fails upward, who they're full of shit. They're shysters, right? They're especially, and this is where I'm going to kind of crap all over my job, but traditionally development people are salespeople, right? Because they have to sell their idea to get it greenlit into production, or even before production to get it greenlit into getting a pilot shot. So a lot of times these development executives who really have no hands-on production experience at all get in these positions where they're suddenly development executives, and the word executive is next to their name. And I'm like, but could you even identify what a grip versus an electric looks like, or who a grip versus an electric, or, point to me, what's Avid, what's Pro Tools, like whatever. They can't. And yet somehow a lot, and I don't mean to shit all over development people, but in my experience, that has been the case, that a lot of development people tend to, through their sales pitchiness, get all up to the top of the development food chain, and then somehow get jobs that empower them to oversee production. And they're not equipped to do it. Just like my natural strengths are certainly production, there's no doubt. And I've been struggling at times to be good at development, because I'm not the kind of person that thinks in these ideas, like big picture ideas. I'm not somebody that's like, hey, I have an idea. I'm the one that says, I know how to make that idea come to fruition. So once I figured out like that's what I'm good at, that's where, between that, my work ethic and all that other shit, I tried to like survive and find where I could shine, and be noticed, so that I could kind of be chosen for different freelance gigs. So yes, internship is critical. Getting your foot in the door is critical. And to build on what you were saying, Dave, absolutely. For a certain segment of the population, getting your foot in the door is enough, and you fail upwards based on who you know, other things that happen in the business that are shady, that sparked the Me Too movement. And I'm happy to say I was never a part of that, nor would I do that. But once you're in, if you are actually in the right way and you've worked hard to get in, and you're in a healthy environment that champions a healthy dose of competition, then you do have to step up and prove your worth. Because especially in this day and age where, especially if you work for a big company like I do, it seems like every year there's like, oh, layoffs are coming, here we go. So there are no guaranteed stable jobs. I don't care what you say. I mean, my job is pretty stable as you can call it, for it being a staff position, but it almost makes you more exposed to getting laid off. Who's on staff, who makes money, let's make these cuts. So in this era of where brands are folding and, people are buying out brands and all this other crap, you have to constantly not only prove your worth. It's not good enough to just do your job anymore. You got to go above and beyond. But then when you get to my age, you have to reinvent yourself, because like I said, I'm used to just doing music on television. So like 10 years ago, when the concept of
Jen, I think we just, hold on a second. Hold on.
smart, vertical,
Okay, good.
crazy.
Yeah, we lost sound for a second. It's okay.
Okay.
Gabrielle, is there any, I'm just going to go back to Gabrielle for a second.
Yeah.
Hold on one second. I've got a thing there. Okay.
So internship is definitely key.
Gabrielle, did we answer your question? I'm trying to unmute you. You're not listening.
I probably didn't. I go all over the place.
No, it's
Yes.
No, it's fine. Yeah, go ahead, Gabrielle.
Okay.
Yeah, you did answer my question. I do worry because I'm in the older bracket of 20s right now. I am closer to 30, so I wonder, sometimes I do wonder, I'm like, I'm older than my competitors, so that, I don't know if that sets me apart in a good or bad way. But I'm still trying to push that.
I think, I can understand what you mean by that, because it's like, especially for like a lot of these positions that are like, we're looking for, social, video producers and to create content for digital platforms. And, a lot of people are getting hired out of college. So it's a little scary to think, am I at a disadvantage because I've been out of, I'm a little older, or maybe I, decided on this, path a little too late. It's never too late. But I'm not going to lie, it may require a little extra work. And I think really what what I would suggest, and you know, I don't know if this is good advice or not, but for me, and this goes back to the keeping it real thing, I think depending on who the employer is and depending on who you're interviewing with, like I can only speak for me. If I'm a hiring manager, I would really appreciate it if somebody said to me, look, you know, I'm a little bit, I wouldn't say behind, but I may not have the experience as some people who might be a few years younger than me, or what have you, or fresh out of this or whatever. But it's like, if you can get FaceTime with somebody, like whether it's this, you know, where there's virtual interviews and all this other stuff, and you can, and this isn't to put pressure on your personality, but like to really, if anything, if people who I'm interviewing with show me that they're a hustler, and not in the bad sense of the word, like I'm going to hustle hard and I'm going to do what it takes to prove to you that even though I may not be this or this or this, I will bust my ass for you. And if I know, like you have a story, you know, your story is whatever, my life took a change and I decided to do this, and now I'm kind of pulling myself out of this circumstance, and I'm now fired up and I want to show that this is who I am and I'm ready to start work. Somebody like that coming to me is way more appealing to me than someone who's like, I went to NYU Film School and I was a Tisch graduate and I have 5 short films and I'm an avid editor, and you know, and it's kind of like, and then first time you mention anything about long hours or anything like that, someone's like, well, you know, I got to be out by 6. You know, it's kind of like, there's like, I would rather go with somebody who's either less seasoned, is getting a later start, needs a break, because I got a break, you know, than somebody who's like formally trained in film and television, because I want good people who are passionate and who are going to build me up. So like, if I were like, for example, like if you were somebody I was interviewing at MTV International, and I, you know, I really vibed with you, and you were telling me like who you listen to and what shows you go to and what makes you excited and why you like this artist, and you know, you did some research and you heard about this thing and you thought that would be a cool show, or I'm going to be like, wow, she does research. She doesn't just say, I want to work in music or whatever. You know, she does her research about my company, about my position. She has questions to ask. She has a story, and she just needs a break. And I can see the passion and the enthusiasm behind this. 9 times out of 10, I'm going to go with somebody like you over somebody who's like, yeah, and I did 4 internships, and you know, and it's kind of like, wait, I'm doing you a favor by hiring you? Hell no, I'm going to pay it forward and find somebody who may need a little bit of a break, whether they're getting a late start or just haven't been able to find something, but just have what I think is the right fit for my culture as my team. Because I've worked with enough people through the years who have either failed upward, could you tell, little saucy about that, or people who have been just total assholes. And there's a lot of them out there, guys. I'm sure you know, there's a lot of them out there. And there's egos, and there's people who are insecure about their own creativity or their own ability to manage or their own job security. Or maybe they're afraid they're going to be exposed for being a fraud, because now, you know, whatever it is, that in my experience, when you deal with people like that, they clamp down, they become control freaks, they don't want you to help. There's a lack of collaborative spirit. And that's like not my scene anymore. Like, I've been there, I've participated, full disclosure, I've participated in office BS and gossip and all that crap. And all it does is it gets you known for being somebody that people can't trust. And I've just learned I don't want that vibe with my team. I want good people who are hungry, who want to learn, who are going to teach me. I mean, I'm only as good as the people I hire. And I know that everyone hears that, but there is almost nothing more true in my experience than that. Okay. I try to hire people who are better than me at what I need them to do, because they're going to make me look better.
Jen, okay.
It's not a, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to make sure your microphone's cutting in. I just want to say,
Oh,
Gabriella, did you get your question answered? You okay with that?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm great. Thank you. Thank you
No
very
problem. Thank you. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to give everybody a little break from talking about this. I just want to give everybody a second to breathe. But I'm going to bring on my first special guest right now.
Oh, Jesus.
So I'm going to put on the special guest right now. And once I...
David Schoen?
No, it's not David. Anyway, here we go. First special guest, you're on the air from Florida.
Hey, Jen. Can you see me?
Who's that?
You were never on when I was doing sports up at Cortland. You should have been our sports person.
By the way, Sue actually was the one who gave me a chance to produce with her on Sports Talk, a show I took over when we were at SUNY Cortland after she left. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Looking good as always, Sue. Looking way better than me, girl.
No, you're looking fabulous. Fabulous in this whole pandemic thing going on.
Crazy. Like I said, today's the first day I've showered in quite some time. I'm not afraid to say that.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling. But it's so interesting to see everything that's gone from us up in 13045 till everything that's going on now. So.
Yep, I know. And the industry, yeah, it's hard to keep up with it. Not only as somebody who's, you know, like, it's hard for me to stay on top of all the social platforms like TikTok. This, like, every 2 months there's a new thing, and it's so much easier if you're younger, and it's a little harder each time, right? Like for me, at least, it's like very hard to stay on top of it.
And it's funny that I have a degree in radio, television, broadcasting, and I did it for a little while, and now I'm into teaching. So it's every career has its own path, and you know.
Absolutely, for sure. I mean, who knew? Honestly, I never would have thought I would have ended up making the majority of my career at MTV, especially since I was like, that was Ted's thing. Like, ooh, I'm not going to touch that, you know? And it's like, be careful what you ask for. Also, with the international side, I was like, when am I ever going to put my international degree or Spanish to good use? And it's hilarious. Here I am, one of my key colleagues in Europe is based out of Madrid.
That's cool.
And so I'm literally like, Manu, necesito practicar mi español contigo. You know, I'm like, you have to get that back into use, you know, but it's funny how things go in different paths, but yet some things come full circle at the same time.
Definitely. I mean, that's how I got into teaching. I was doing television production, but for a school. And so it's nice to have a broadcasting degree because it's a little bit of everything.
Okay,
absolutely.
Thank you, Sue. I really appreciate you being on there. We're going to have special guests coming up there.
Bye.
Okay.
So Red Dragons.
We do have a student who has a question for you right now.
Please. Yeah.
Aaliyah Humphrey. Aaliyah, I'm going to unmute you right here. I'm not the best at the board operation, which I'm doing right here.
You're
Aaliyah,
doing great.
Hi. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Aaliyah.
So I'm not really a producer person. Well, I'm a writer first. I'm not a producer, but I'm interested in producing and directing. But my question is, how can a writer like me, or that's into like screenwriting and like journalism, have a producer mindset when writing for a TV or film?
Wow, that's a great question. Wow. First of all, thank God there are people like you in this world, because I am the worst writer. I can't write scripts to save my life. Even stupid VJ segments that toss to videos take me like 4 times the length of time that normal people do. But so I fully respect your gift, because I certainly don't have it. And because of that, I may not be the best person to give advice on this, but let me make sure I understood the question. So from a writing perspective, a writing mind, you're interested in also writing screenplays or TV scripted shows. And so how, when you're looking to do that, could you do that keeping in mind the producer mindset or director mindset? Okay. Let me think. I don't want to give BS responses and talk out of my butt. So I would say from a writer's perspective, how, as you're writing scripts and screenplays, can you look at things from a producer mind? Okay. I think the first thing that you kind of have to figure out is, all right, well, what is a producer's role in either of these circumstances, right? And also a director role and a writer role. So for different productions and different circumstances, those roles kind of ebb and flow a little bit. So do you want to let me know, like, give me an example, like a feature film or a scripted TV series or a news program? Like pick something, throw at me.
I'd say like maybe like an award show.
Okay.
Per se, like a music award show or.
Now you're talking my language. All right,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
like that.
And you know what? I'm glad you said that, because that's the one thing I actually could speak to, having worked with a writing team on the Video Music Awards for MTV. Back, I mean, long time ago. We're talking almost 20 years now. But okay, so the reason I was asking you about, first you need to know what the roles are, is, excuse me, a producer in film, and you probably already know this, you know, that role is different from a producer in television, from a producer in news. So for example, very quick, a producer in film, they're the ones that really have to deal with all the painful tasks, like dealing with the studio, getting the money, working with a director who could be great or a pain in the ass and difficult to compromise on, and all this stuff. So producer in film is much more on the business and bottom line and budget side, and, you know, making sure everything's buttoned up legally and all that kind of stuff. There's not much creative input from a film, on a film set. And my fellow producers are probably going to be like, speak for yourself, Demi. It depends on the circumstance, of course. If it's an independent thing, you might be likely to have more of a creative role. But for films, especially those feature films with a studio, you're the one that's just banging your head against the wall. So I just say that to give you a little perspective that a producer role in film is not necessarily going to give you those, if you're looking for creative, you know, inspiration, that's more on the business side, contracts, budgets, cast, you know, headache, to be honest. Like a producer, the one thing a producer is across all of these things is a problem solver. First and foremost, problem solver, get it done at all costs without getting anyone arrested, sued, or miserable, basically. So with TV though, producer role could change depending on the project. So for the VMAs, for example, the producers are really the creative minds of the show. They're the ones that work on the format of the show. What order of, you know, how many performances do we have in the VMAs this year? How many awards are we giving out? Who we want to host? Is there a host? Where are we shooting this show? Is it New York? Is it LA? You know, all those, what's the set look like? How are we going to creatively produce each performance the way the VMAs has always been known for, these iconic, you know, never to be repeated performances, things like that. So the producing side on the VMAs is very much creative, as well as logistics. So for a writer, if you were curious to know how to think more of a producer, I would say on an award show, in a way, you're almost forced to, with whether you like it or not, to think about what the producer wants, because at the end of the day, the executive producer is the one where the buck stops there. And so, you know, you've got all these producers, but at the end of the day, if I, for example, were the executive producer of the VMAs, I'm the one that's giving out the creative exercises to the head writer, who has a team of writers, of people like you under them. And I say to the head writer, okay, I need you guys, we just locked in these 8 presenters, celebrity presenters. Here are the pairings. You know, we're going to put, you know, again, I'm dating myself, but I'm going back in time. We're going to put, you know, Tony Bennett with the Chili Peppers. We're going to put Martha Stewart with Busta Rhymes. We're going to, you know, all those weird, funny pairings. So as a result, we need you guys to now script, copy for them when they come out and intro the award. And we all know from watching tons of horrible, boring award shows, of which some years of the VMAs were really bad, that you could either punt it and just do the usual, like, our next presenter or our next award is blah, 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 you know, or you do the obnoxious, like, you know, predictable banter that everyone knows they're full of shit. They don't want to say it. Or you can really try to get creative and think about what kind of copy can I script that is going to appeal to a Martha Stewart and a Busta? What can we do to make this moment now in this generation viral, right? Stand out from a 3.5-hour award show. What's the one we want in the headlines tomorrow? What's the one we want people to laugh at and go, oh my God, that's so MTV. Go ahead. It's the writers team who go and they sequester themselves in the writer's room. I mean, that's, you guys I'm sure have heard of that, like on all these scripted, you know, shows. And they go and sequester themselves, and each of them gets on their headphones and cranks like they get an assignment. I want, you know, script copy for these. I want this package idea because we're going to do a parody on whoever. So, you know, you're going to script that, you're going to do that. And everyone has their role, and then they all get back together, vibe off each other. The head writer then extracts the best creative ideas, presents it back to me, and we go, yes, let's do that. Pitch that to Martha and Busta. And then it goes to the talent weighs in, goes in the script, and there you go. So I know that was a long story, but my point is, on an award show specifically, a writer can get to understand the mind of a producer by simply just working on that show, because you're not that you're an employee of the producer, but in a way you're an employee of the project to support the producer and the creative vision, because you guys are the ones that are going to come up with the script that I'm going to look at and go, this is fucking brilliant. Yes, this is great. This is hilarious. And this feels MTV. This feels MTV. So yes, done. So
I'm sorry. No.
I hope that answers the question, because after a few of those exercises, you'll learn, like, yeah.
Lee, did Jen answer your question? Is there anything else you want to ask her?
Yes, she answered my question.
Awesome.
I think that's it for now.
No,
yeah, but
cool.
you answered my question. Thank you.
No problem. If you have any other
Absolutely.
questions, just come back to me and PM me, and I'll let you do. Okay, we have somebody else on the line right now. This is Mateo. Mateo, you're up and on the air with Jen. Hold on one second.
Hey, Mateo.
I got to unmute his mic. My fault. Hold on. Hi, Mateo.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How you doing, man?
Good. First of all, thank you for taking the time out to come talk to us. We really appreciate it, especially
Thank
for me. I
you.
definitely want to get inside type of business, so that's no problem. So my question is, how important is it to have your own endeavors, in my case, such as a podcast, when applying for networks such as MTV?
That's a really good question too, the podcast. So I couldn't hear you too clearly in the beginning, but I think the question was, you are currently doing your own podcast, and so how does somebody, or no, you're just interested in doing podcasts, and how does that get pitched to MTV? Is that the question?
My question is, how important is it to have your own endeavors? So in my case, my own endeavors includes me having my own podcast. So I currently have a podcast where me and a co-host, we interview entrepreneurs, anybody from like the music side to even just having their own business, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So how important is that, or like having other types of projects, whether it's like films or any of your own like side projects, or side hustles when it goes?
Yeah, I totally, that's a great question. And the answer is, I personally, like, do I think it's necessary for you to get a job, and it's like a prerequisite, you know, that ultimately gets you in? No, but I think having side hustles or passion projects, or, you know, whatever you want to call it, doing your own films, your own shows, your own podcasts, is critical, because that's hands-on practice. You're producing and hosting and booking interviews and doing technical stuff. You're making sure the shot is framed properly. You're making sure there's some lighting, hopefully. You're not like completely backlit like I am, which I'm violating like a very big production
Okay.
no right here.
We're in a time right now we have to deal with this, so it's perfectly okay. We love you for everything you're doing. I will say that right now.
But I truthfully, I think just like getting an internship, and this may help answer Gabriella's question earlier and even Aaliyah's question too. If you guys, like, half the battle is practice. You know what I mean? Like, and if you're not fortunate enough to be able to do that in your job, you know, if you have a day job that's just paying the bills, like, I get it, trust me. And it's not what you want to do, but it's what you have to do. Having that creative outlet, first and foremost, if you're a creative person, or even if you're not a creative person, but you just love, you want to explore, you're adventurous, you want to test yourself, you want to see if you're good at it, you know, like, absolutely critical, because you learn from trial by fire. And what's even more important, you learn how to improvise in live circumstances or even pre-taped circumstances. So, you know, like, your lights go out, like, all right, what am I going to do? All right, I'm going to grab a flashlight and I'm going to put it under my chin so at least people can see my face, you know, or whatever it is. So I feel like, you know, that is the essence of also being a producer, is you're going to hit horrible, almost seemingly insurmountable walls at times. And it's how you react to that, right? Don't panic. You could panic inside, but if you're the producer or the director or the person that everyone's looking to for answers, you got to bury that shit deep and try to do the game face. And then with that, with the calm, you say, you know, how do I work around this? And that, even on whether it's a podcast, whether it's writing a script, you know, whether it's looking for the new gig, you know, that is how you can keep your creative juices going. That is how you can teach yourself. Oftentimes, those are the best ways to learn. So I think it's important. I think it's immensely important on a, you know, if you need to fuel those creative juices and kind of like some junkies with exercise need, you know, then you've got to do that. And I think it makes you a better producer, director, host, technician, lighting designer, whatever you want to call it. It helps you for sure.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Now, is that
Thank
good?
you so much.
Okay.
And good luck with that, man. That podcast sounds awesome. Do that. Those are huge.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jen, we have another person on the line right now who wants to ask you a question. This is Hector.
Okay.
Hector, just give me 1 sec. I got to turn your microphone on. Okay, Hector, you're on air.
Thanks, Professor. First off, hi, Jen. It's an honor to talk with you.
Oh, man. Thanks, Hector. It's great to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you. I just had one question. Well, actually, a couple of questions to ask you. But
Sure.
I've been listening in, and I love your story so far. I like how you referenced back a lot of the jobs you produced, like back in the day, like MTV Spring Break, and I can just kind of relate because I see a lot of like throwback footage and archive footage, like MTV Fashionably Loud and back in the day.
Yeah.
So it
That's
really
right.
interests me because you've referenced a lot of things that I'm interested in. I'm a big sports enthusiast, and I also have a big love for music, hip hop itself, but a lot of other genres like rock and a lot of other genres in general. But the question that I wanted to ask you was kind of like in reference to Gabriella's earlier question. Do you know right now personally if there's any like internships that these big corporations like Viacom are offering at the moment?
That's a great question. And I know that the quick answer is yes. I know what I should have done before this call. And I can easily follow up with all you guys. I need to find out exactly what, if it's like a tab on a drop-down menu on the Viacom CBS website, the career website. I would encourage you to maybe take a look at that, like Viacom CBS careers. I can't remember the official website, but if you Google that, it'll come up. And I would hope that somewhere there is a tab for internships. and it's a pretty formalized process. Usually what you have to do is, it requires a lot of advance. So it's not like if you're, like, for example, if you were to be graduating now, you know, or close to now, and you were looking for an internship like now, that's not going to happen because they do that in advance. They do it usually like a semester, maybe even 2 semesters in advance. And it's part of a big kind of, you have to apply, and it's not too bad of a daunting task, but it's just one of those things where you got to do the formal process where you apply, and you can choose, like, out of all the brands, what are the ones you would prefer to work for and things like that. I can follow up for sure with you after this through David if you want, and just confirm for you exactly. I don't know where people are now with hiring for which semester. Like, my guess is, I'm guessing the summer internships are already full at Viacom CBS. But I think everything in the future, unfortunately, is a little bit on hold because of the world we live in right now. But once things get back to normal, I think it's safe to say that you should assume that for big corporations like a Viacom or HBO or Netflix or, you know, any of Hulu's, any of that stuff, Amazon, you would probably need to assume you'd have to do it a semester to 2 semesters in advance. Does that help answer your question?
Hector? Yes, he did. He just gave me a thumbs up there. Okay, I got another message coming out. This is from Brian Menzel, the great sport operator. But okay, go ahead, Brian, you're on the air.
All right, how are you guys doing today?
Good.
Great.
Okay, so I have a passion for sports, and I've been looking to try to get a job in sports broadcasting to a point where I've created a sports entity, a brand, run a podcast, and run 2 different social media accounts, and trying to just broaden how much I know with audio production, video production, graphic design, all these different things. And I know how hard it is to land an on-camera job nowadays because of how competitive the area is. I just wanted to know, what are some skills employers are looking for, and how can I differentiate myself from others?
Wow, that's a great question too. You guys are asking really good questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, seriously, this is really good stuff, because some of them I'm like, oh shit, how am I going to answer this? No, I'm kidding. But from a talent perspective, that's really great, because that is also part of my job on the MTV side, is to not so much find music talent, because we work with the labels and management and all that stuff. So that's on lock, that's covered. But when it comes to identifying new faces that represent the brand, you know, for lack of a better word, who are the new VJs, you know, who's the new Carson Daly, and, you know, all that stuff. That does tend to fall under my department, because we like to think that we know enough about the brand at the HQ side that we can identify talent that feels right within the brand. So what I would say is, if you knew, for example, Brian, like, give me an example. Like, what's your dream job? Is it ESPN? Is it MLB? Like, what would be a dream job for you on the broadcasting side?
Well, dream job would really be looking into being like an anchor on ESPN or one of the big networks, or like Fox Sports, CBS Sports,
right?
Any one of the big networks.
Gotcha. Okay. So in terms of, like, kind of being a home base anchor where you're throwing out to different teams that are on the spot, or are you looking at like play-by-play, that kind of stuff, or analysis? Like, I'm just trying to zone in a little bit more specifically.
It's looking more into like analysis, not really what like Joe Buck and Troy Aikman do for play-by-play.
Love those guys.
It's more
Okay.
It's more kind of like to what the guys in the studio do, like Stuart Scott did with ESPN, and then what you see now
gotcha.
with James Brown with CBS.
Perfect. Great. Okay, great. Thank you for that. I think, you know, and the reason I'm asking, it's not unlike what Aaliyah was asking. You know, you kind of have to, the host or anchor role evolves or changes depending on what the need of the show is, right? And of course, but knowing that it's sports, knowing that we're talking about a studio environment where you'd be an anchor, probably sitting next to other co-anchors or analysis guys and women, or throwing out, you know, to a live interview or tape or whatever it may be, post-game analysis, whatever. That specific role, what I would say, and again, full disclosure, as everyone knows, I have not made a career out of sports production, but I'm a huge sports fan, and I watch, and I'm also hypercritical of people who I do not like, which is awful. It's awful, but we all do it. So I know what I look for as a sports fan who happens to also have a career in production. And for me, somebody like that has to have a combination of things. One, just on the technical side, let's start with that. Okay, so technical side, in a studio environment, you guys, most of you guys know this, right, from doing this at school. You have to know how to listen to the crew on the floor, right? And I know this sounds obvious, so I'll go through it quick. But like, you know, you need to have a good rapport with your floor producer, if there is one, or stage manager and all that stuff, because if they're there to make you look good, right? So first and foremost, the rapport that you can build on the floor with the camera crew, the floor producers, the stage managers, all the lighting guys and women, the better, because they're going to stop at certain times, whereas maybe with somebody who might be more of an a-hole, they'll be like, you know, I don't give a shit, there's a shadow on his face. But they may go like, wait, let's look out for him and make sure he's being presented properly. So